Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun with today's video. We're going to talk about don't poop on my gear, bro. It seems like the gun community, and we've touched upon this in the past just very lightly, but it seems like the gun community is very resistant to change. The gun community loves to hold on to cartridges, firearms, accessories, and they tend to poo-poo new stuff until enough people get interested in the new stuff that they go, oh, okay, I'm going to use it too. But many times some of the stuff is junk and goes nowhere, especially in terms of cartridges that come out. So today we have Jason, the cameraman, with us. And we also have Dave from Copper Custom, my business partner, Copper Custom. And we have several items we want to talk about and some ideas that we find rather comical and rather interesting about the gun industry as a whole and people and their, interests in different things and how it just seems like everybody's just so quick to poo-poo new ideas and new technologies. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things that I was a big proponent of was the OSS the silencer, right? At first, the brain trust of the internet was it's snake oil, it's junk, it's a joke, it's loud at the muzzle, oh my gosh, they're going nowhere, and that's the end of it. That was the brain trust. That was the forums, and the forums have their own problems that we can talk about if you want to, but that was everybody's opinion of them. And then OSS said yes to my offer to bring them out, put them on Copper's sound pressure meter, and we actually did our own testing with it. And we measured it 1.6 meters off the deck, 1 meter left, and got the numbers there. But then we did the new standard, which the military was doing, which is roughly 6 inches from the shooter's right ear, trying to protect the hearing of the shooter, caring less about whatever's in front of your gun and its hearing. And we realized that it had really low back pressure, and it was more hearing safe at the shooter's ear. And so we started to really push OSS, and we use OSS almost exclusively on our gas guns now. Mm-hmm. Bolt guns doesn't make as much sense. It's a good baffled can, but certainly on a gas gun, there's so many benefits that this little guy right here is the future. Mm-hmm. Now everybody's starting to do flow through. You start seeing all the major content creators. They're now talking about them years later. The military's adopted them. The FBI just adopted a version of this, and this is the future. Other companies now are trying to make up their own flow-through designs that don't infringe on their patents. So it's the future, right?
I've noticed this as well. I've noticed a lot of companies are starting to make kind of better flowing baffle designs if they are more of a flow through, maybe not necessarily open in the front like an OSS to allow the gas to flow all the way through, but they're definitely trying to have better flow with their cans because they are. If you watch a traditional baffled suppressor, it is just gas just everywhere blasting back at the shooter and whatnot. Especially with AR-10s, OSS helps solve that issue with suppressing those because of the pressures involved with those. They would always malfunction if you'd put traditional, not always, but traditional baffled cans would cause major overpressurization of AR-10s, whereas OSS helped bring that pressure down, helped reduce the sound to it. And what's the idea of a suppressor? Flash reduction, signature reduction, things
and hearing
of that
protection.
Nature. Right. So it's doing that job, and it's doing it well.
I think, the biggest thing that was plaguing it, and you mentioned it, Tim, is testing standards. The testing standards of the day didn't lean towards, Huxworks now, not OSS. So if you're searching, it's Huxworks. So,
right.
It put it in a bad light, but it was testing a parameter that your typical shooter isn't as interested in as the decibel impact to your ear, which once that testing standard changed, I think that's when we saw, the tipping point of the popularity of Huxworks and people actually believing in them is when they were actually seeing the numbers at the ear.
Right.
And even me, because that was a couple years after we had started, even me, I remember being out at a demo, and you threw one on a Tavor, and I was like, "Hey!"
I told the guy to take his ears off and listen to this.
Right, and the guys at the demo, I was like, "Hey, I don't know if that's going to be it." And you were like, "Yes, I've heard this thing.
I've tested it."
And I was shocked. I was standing directly behind the shooter, and it amazed me, especially on the Tavor. They just seem to mesh really well for some reason.
And IWI went from there and started selling them and promoting them with their Tavor's Next 95s because of what we had done in our testing.
But it's funny that really the design didn't change that much, but the testing parameters at which we judged them changed, which kind of completely flipped people's opinions of that suppressor and started its rise of popularity.
Yeah, because I see a lot more on Instagram, forum talk, you name it. There's a lot more people, even in videos now, a lot of YouTubers running OSS suppressors. And I'm like, I love to see it.
Rob Ski puts these on every single AK he shoots now. I love that because of the concentricity issue typically you run into with AKs, but Rob's a big advocate of OSS now.
Right.
So it's interesting to see, but see, this was poo-pooed. This is a perfect example of the brain trust of the internet. It's garbage. Yep. And they were citing an old metric that made no sense. I tried to research where that 1.6 meters off the deck and 1 meter left even came from. I talked to Silencer Shop, I should say. I Googled it. I tried everything I could to find out what was the thinking in establishing that standard. The distance off the deck and the distance left, because the new Army standard for the CSAS program was 5 points of measurement, but they could all be over 140 decibels except right here. If the suppressor failed the right ear test, the can was canceled from the CSAS program. OSS won the CSAS program, right? So that, to me, when they came out to me and we did our testing using the old methodology, I'm like, yeah, man, the internet's right. This thing's noisy. They said, well, this is what the Army's doing now. I don't think we could talk about it at the time when we were first told that, but by the time we produced a video, it was okay to talk about it. And when we did that measurement, we started doing other measurements. Like every can we test now, we do that measurement now. And it is surprising. Guns that have really good numbers at the muzzle are technically deafening you at the right ear. They may measure 138 decibels at the muzzle, but they're popping at 145 at the ear or louder.
Getting all that gas
all that pressure's coming back down the barrel. People go, well, you just regulate the gas flow. Yes, you can adjust the dwell time to minimize a little bit of that port pop, but 90% of that gas is coming back down the barrel. It's not going through the gas system.
Exactly. I think a lot of people miss that point. It's going to take the path of least resistance. That's that big old bore that you're trying to suppress. All that gas is coming right back down.
As soon as that breech face opens, that hot gas hits air, boom, you get a port pop. And that's what's making that noise. This eliminates that completely. When you put these on an M16, it doesn't increase the cyclic rate at all. But you put a baffled can on an M16, it significantly increases the cyclic rate. You can hear the difference in the cadence, how fast the gun fires.
And we've seen, I mean, AR, the M16 gun can, there's a lot of modifications you can go, and you can run them on a traditionally baffled can on an M16 style gun and make it reliable, and you can tune it out. What I've witnessed is AR-10s, nightmare.
Nightmare.
Traditionally baffled can on an AR-10 is a nightmare. Accessible on, definitely acceptable on an AR-15. You can make it work, but AR-10s, that's where the OSS stuff,
I made a post on a popular AR-15 forum years ago saying AR-10s were a nightmare to suppress with baffled cans, and oh, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Mine runs just fine. I never had to change a thing. And it was in the thread that I was in. But then you go and search the forum, and it was thread after thread after thread of people. I had to put this adjustable gas regulator on there. I had to do this. I had to do that. I had to do this. Of course. And then people started to admit, okay, so the AR-10's a little bit different. The M16's more forgiving, or the AR-15, right? So I've never really had a problem with one malfunctioning. AR-10s, we had tons of problems with baffled cans, but AR-15s, they would just increase their cyclic rate and tons of gas in the face, right where the upper and lower hinges, you always get gas blowing right into your face. If you did a 30-round mag dump on a target, you get 10 rounds into it, and your eyes are going closed from the toxic gases getting in your face. That's not the case with these. You put them on your AR-15, do a mag dump, and you're just fine. You're not gassing yourself out.
So we've seen a reversal on the, poo-poo on the gear hang.
Right.
Gear
one example.
We're starting to see. So, and there's more.
One other thing to add to that before we move on to another product. The original design of the OSS cans were clumsy, big, and heavy. So
it was like a three-piece system. Or something.
Oh, no. There were like 150 different SKUs or 200 different SKUs because it was all modular. You increase the length and the different muzzle devices.
Yeah, but I'm saying in the majority you had just that outer sleeve, an inner thing, and there was like three pieces. It doesn't matter really the length. Yeah, there's SKUs,
you had an end cap, an internal piece, an outer sleeve, and then a muzzle device that held it all together.
4 pieces, roughly.
But there were 150 different versions of that you could tune it to your gun.
Yeah.
And we worked with OSS later when they started to come out with cans like this. Their naming conventions were just ridiculous. And, we told them, rename it something simple, come up with simple names, and get rid of all those SKUs.
Yeah.
And they took that to heart, and that they did evolve.
But that was another turning point in the popularity of the brand, was when they did the design change, because that original one was, even if the performance was there,
worked great, it was a nightmare.
No nightmare.
It was pretty heavy, bulky.
and easily
clumsy.
damaged, right? When you take them apart, it's left-hand threads. The muzzle device holds the end cap on, which holds the body on. You unscrew the end cap, and you slide your suppressor off, and the inner tube falls out, which is very thin steel, could be damaged and disrupt the flow of gases, and then you've damaged the design or the ability of the suppressor to work effectively. This resolved that. You can, bash concrete with this, and you're not going to damage the internal structure of the silencer.
Right.
So that's one example where, the internet brain trust was just parroting misinformation. You get the guys on the forums that have been there for 20 years, and everybody looks up to them like they're some sort of a god, and they trash talk something, and then it just trickles down, and of course that becomes the new truth.
Guaranteed. Never tried it.
Never seen one.
Never anything.
And that's how misinformation spreads on the internet. And the forums are just full of that just bad info. That's the reason I just stay off of them now, because you go there and try to look up stuff, and you'll just see conflicting reports about everything. But anyway, there have been other things. Let's talk about cartridges for a minute, and then we'll come back maybe to some products. So cartridges, another thing that people just love to poo-poo. They just love to poo-poo cartridges. The 6.5 need more, does nothing that 308 can't do, blah, 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 blah. Well, in all reality, yes, it does do things that 308 can't do. Has lower recoil, has a much higher ballistic coefficient, much more efficient at range, outstanding hunting cartridge, outstanding PRC cartridge, because I think that's what it was originally developed for. I mean, it does things 308 is completely incapable of doing efficiently. Past 800 yards, 308 is like 7.62 by 39. Yeah, you can hit the target, but you better be really, really good with your wind calls.
Yeah.
And so 6.5 Creedmoor extends that to 1,500 yards or more, right? I'm sure there's people who shot it to 2,000 or more. I mean, people do all sorts of crazy stuff. I even watched a guy when I was at Loophole shoot a 308 to a mile and hit a target. And the round was went transonic, and he still said it was predictable. The 175 SMKs would, when they went transonic, they would deviate a predictable manner, and that's how he was able to hit a steel target at a mile. So you can do incredible things like that, but the average shooter,
Right.
I remember the first time we went out to the long range with the 6.5 Creedmoor, and I was used to shooting the 1,000 with the 308s and holding like 3 mils left for the little wind that we had out there, and hitting the steel target, trying to figure out my dope, right? Watching trace and figure out my dope for 308, and I go out there with the 6.5 Creedmoor, and I went from 3 mils left to favoring left. Right, just aim a little left on the target.
Yeah,
and
I remember you just hold right edge, left edge, depending on the wind
versus mills, and we were like, holy cow!
You're at least making impacts.
That's just due to better, bullet design, better flight
great sectional
characteristics,
density,
stuff,
outstanding ballistic coefficient, and it is head and shoulders over 308. 308 just doesn't have that ballistic coefficient. That's one of the reasons why you see the world's militaries going to 6.5 and 6.8 cartridges. It's always been a popular bullet diameter, simply because of its sectional density and increased ballistic coefficient and bearing surface.
The conversation around Creedmoor when it was first released was that it was born for the competition realm and not for the hunting realm. If you remember early on, guys were like, "Oh, that's a competition long-range cartridge. It's not really a hunting cartridge." Boy, were they wrong. I mean, Creedmoor is fantastic, and it's
I've
developed as that.
I've killed a lot of stuff with Creedmoor.
Now, over the past several years, it's been adopted as a really solid hunting cartridge.
Yeah.
But I remember working the retail floor back in the day when it was first becoming popular, and it was purely long-range heavy barrel guns.
Right.
And that was all it was used for. Now, I mean, almost every brand that has a hunting-focused rifle offers it in Creedmoor.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
but I waited. My interest in it was when it was still a Wildcat, but I'm not a Wildcat type of guy. I'm not going to go set up a reloading press to get a certain cartridge, right? It's just not my thing. But the minute Hornady seems to lead the way of taking Wildcats into production, and Hornady had done that. They had brought out their 6.5 Creedmoor, and that's when we took it out and started playing with it, and I realized, oh my goodness, this thing actually is doing something really impressive. Lighter recoil. I could spot my own shots at distance because of the lighter recoil, and the bullet was getting there with less drift, and I was just blown away by it.
It's good.
But to this day, you have people still saying it's a 6.5 need more, and it's garbage, and 308's better, and
it's a good thing you did back then. That
makes your head hurt.
It came around too, because it was just me and you in the shop back then. So we'd close on Tuesdays and go to the long range to shoot video.
I remember that.
And I am a god awful spotter. So good thing you could spot your own shots, because I got behind the spotting scope. Well, I couldn't see anything.
Yeah,
I'm terrible.
That's an acquired taste. You have to learn to set the spotting scope up and then kind of focus it forward of the target, and then set it such a way that you can see the bullet coming down.
And thank goodness you have Jason now, who's excellent.
A seasoned spotter.
Right.
Yeah. But
Well, yeah, it's just like any of those cartridges. I've become kind of a fan of the 6 mil Creedmoor, which is just a more modern 243, and then you've got the 300 PRCs out there. That's just a more modern 300 Win Mag, and you've got all this stuff. But every time those cartridges come out, they're like, yeah, the margins are 2 inches of drop just at this yardage and that.
Right.
And it's like, dude, Jesus, criminy sakes here, 2 inches of drop, really? You know what I mean? Like, they really sit there and focus on what's on paper. Most folks will just sit there and see what's on paper, but they're not looking at whatever barrel length it was that they were doing. Like, was that shot out of a 22, a 26-inch barrel, whatever it was, you know what I mean? They're just seeing these numbers. You could take that 300 PRC and a 300 Win Mag and show the 300 Win Mag to be more favorable if you shot it out of a shorter barrel on a 300 PRC, you know what I mean? So you can have things play in your favor. My thing is, try it out. Check it out. You know what I mean?
Right.
See for yourself. Don't let the forums or read about it and poo-poo all over it and be like, well, maybe I don't want to get into that. It's like, maybe you should.
Right.
I mean, so.
All right, hold on. Last 10 years, favorite cartridge that's come out or at least become popular, and the one that you thought was the biggest flop or the worst one.
My absolute favorite thing right now is 6 mil Creedmoor. I absolutely love that thing because very little recoil. You can, spot your shots easily through that. I have it chambered in an AR-10 and a bolt gun. Both are extremely, accurate, fun to shoot.
I can attest
the
to that.
ammunition is available, like right
Nobody's
now.
shooting it. Yeah.
The people that are shooting it are the precision shooter guys. The match ammunition is hard to get. Why? Because you're battling those guys buying the factory match ammunition, right? Or they reload their own, but Hornady Black, HSM,
Varminting cartridges,
everything. Everybody seems to have a load for 6 mil Creedmoor, and it's in stock by the thousands of boxes all over the place. So to me, that's been my favorite thing. And then the one cartridge that came out that I thought was an absolute kind of a dud, but I'm trying to turn it around by renaming it.
I know it. All right, I'm gonna put numbers down here, Dave. You look at my hands. I'm gonna guess it.
A 350 Legend.
3.5. I knew it.
So the 350 Legend, I understand why it came out. It came out for those states or counties or whatever it is that have a straight wall mandate on their cartridges. And
5
whatnot.
whopping states, by the way.
It's just, you have to have a special magazine for it because it doesn't fit in an AR-15 magazine. And I think only like Duramag or something makes a magazine for it that holds 10 or 20 rounds. And so far, I'm not having luck with the feeding of that thing. But I want to turn it around and call it a 9 mil Magnum of some kind. You know how you got 9 mil PCCs and stuff like that? So I built like a short barrel rifle out of the thing and have made it an 11.5-inch barrel, and I'm going to call it a 9 mil Magnum essentially and see what, see what we can do with it.
We were driving down to Texas, and I'm old enough to remember a new cartridge back in the 80s. It was called the 357 Maximum. Do you remember that cartridge?
Yeah.
It was a 357 Magnum that was lengthened like a quarter of an inch.
I'm aware of it, but I don't remember it from the 80s.
I know.
I was a baby.
Picture of this.
I did.
Like,
I brought
holy
it.
cow, that's the three.
It's a rimmed 350 Legend.
We actually sold a firearm 357 Maximum a year ago.
Do we get it from a collection?
We got it in a collection,
Yeah.
and it actually went very fast.
It's
People
crazy
knew exactly
because
what it was.
But it was one of those things that, boom, guns and ammo, everybody's hyping it to the max. And, the cylinders on the guns that used to had to be lengthened. It was a huge cartridge.
Yeah.
And, of course, it required an extremely long barrel to make use of that extra powder. And it just went nowhere. I mean, when you looked at the other Magnum cartridges out there, you could easily get a 44
I've got this
mag and
124 grain
Sewell.
stuff that's supposed to be flying at 2,500. Now I assume that's maybe out of a 16 or 18-inch barrel. Now that I've chopped it down to 11.5, I couldn't get the chronograph to work to give me an exact number, but I'm curious to see
Thanks, Caldwell.
See what I'm pushing out of this thing, out of this 11.5, because it seems to do pretty well out of short barrels. There was a guy that did 350 Legend and cut the barrel inch by inch all the way down to like 7, and it did actually pretty well. It was, I want to say, still up in the 21s or so, maybe even 22s out of an 11.5-inch barrel. So I was calling it like the 9 mil Magnum and running it as like a 9 mil PCC type of thing. So.
If I remember
Video
correctly,
would come soon.
The original marketing behind the 350 Legend was that it was more powerful than 30-30, right? But when you
It was to compete with,
But when you compared all the cartridges, it was the top end Energy 350 was
With the
just slightly
lowest.
over the lowest 30-30.
Yes.
Right.
So it was a little bit of
marketing.
There's where the 300 hammer comes in. That was
Yeah.
more or less a better competitor, I think, against the 30-30. But see, its selling point was it was straight wall for the 5 states that require straight wall in public lands, and that would feed reliably in a gas gun. But here's one thing I found funny about that statement. Why does 22 long rifle not typically feed 100% in autoloaders? Because of its straight wall case. What's one of the features that makes an AK reliable? It's tapered case. What makes 5.56 reliable? It's tapered case, less so than the by 39s. But the point being, straight walled cases are not known for auto loading reliability,
Right.
and you're running into issues
Exactly.
with it. So the 350 Legend to me is the biggest faux pas of any modern cartridge. I think I may have to update my comment because it is. I remember being on a hunt down in Texas. I was told to use the 350 Legend. I took the shot, got the kill, but I remember calling up the manufacturer saying, I am not taking a shot past 50 yards because the Winchester ammunition was absolute garbage. We visibly showed in video that you could visibly see the case links varied from cartridge to cartridge out of the same box.
Yep.
Wouldn't chamber, couldn't get a bolt action lock on it, couldn't get an auto to close on it, and it was throwing lead all over the place. And they got mad at me. I said, look, if a deer doesn't step inside 50, 75 yards, I'm not shooting at it because I'm not going to wound an animal. And thank God one stepped in about 65, 70 yards. I hit it. But in the video, you can see the darn bullet go and hit it. I mean, it's pathetic velocity and power.
I remember watching the group's form of that thing at the time, and it was...
Dude, I get so mad. I wanted to huck the rifle out the window.
It was hilarious. But a lot of folks are saying that was like the first generation of stuff, if you will, where they were trying to just throw it out on the market and get it going. A lot of folks have said they've kind of made things a lot better. So I don't know. I'm finding out. I'm finding out with this particular thing to see, just because I have it, and why not? And ammo, again, is available right now because I think a lot of people just don't care.
It won't be a thing until deer season here,
Right.
anyway.
Deer season hits, then they'll buy up some more of that ammo.
But in the past, you've been into 450 Bushmaster too.
I've
458
loved
SOCOM
458 SOCOM,
but
450
but 450
Bushmaster.
Bushmaster straight wall cartridge.
It is.
Right.
But that particular one, what they did was they took the magazine, like a 20 or 30 round magazine, they had a follower on it that was just in the center. So that thing didn't feed from a right and left.
It was a
Right.
center fed.
It was a center fed thing. So they just had the one essential ramp on an AR-15, and it actually feeds pretty good. The 350 Legend has that right
Staggering.
and left, staggering to it. And I think my malfunctions are coming from it's like ramming it more
At an angle.
upwards. Yep. And then it's just not. It's not working very well.
So I follow this Facebook page that talks about 350 Legend, and you'll see the new people come in with their factory gun and factory ammo and posting their pathetic groups, and then you'll see the old timers that are posting their load data, who've gotten actually pretty good performance out of it in terms of accuracy anyway. And that's all because they're hand loading and experimenting and figuring out what's going to work in the gun, because factory ammo, as far as I can tell, is still not the best performing ammunition in terms of accuracy.
But that's the thing. That kind of goes back to don't poo-poo on the gear. If you like it, use it.
You can
If
make it work,
wanna
maybe.
Try it. Yeah, go in. You can probably find somebody that'll help you make it work, or find a loader help you. And I do love the fact that there are people willing to come out and help others. But I do find it interesting. I had at one point in time I would ask a Predator forum, some calling like type of information, and it was just like this list of basically noob, piece of junk, what are you even doing here? I'm like, what? Why are you even responding to my comment? What is happening here?
Welcome to the internet.
Right,
Did you ever, being in Indiana, and being a shotgun state that transitioned to straight wall
Oh my
cartridges
God.
and now into bottlenecks eventually?
I remember
But
shotguns.
358 Hoosier.
Yes.
Did you ever mess with that?
Did not,
How close
but I
is that
remember
to
that.
350?
Well, that was essentially their answer, the 358 Hoosier. There was a guy in Indiana that would make these special bolt-action rifles that were really expensive.
People were sending in
Yes.
guns to this guy to have done.
I didn't even know
right
that.
and left.
Because, we had the shotgun slugs, which, as you know,
Yeah.
are just a lead slug flying through the air, very inaccurate.
May or may not hit what you're aiming
right?
at, yeah.
And then when we went to straight wall, you had the 450 Bushmaster and things like that.
Well, even
But
that
it
came.
wasn't-
That was on the tail. Like initially, you only had 44 mag,
Right.
500 Smith and Wesson,
44,
460,
357, stuff like that.
357 mag was the minimum.
Yep.
Because you couldn't hold on to a Ruger M7744 or M44 357. Like as soon as they came in, they were gone because that's what people were using for, the straight wall thing. And then 450 Bushmaster came out, and then they started opening things up. And now we're at the point where on private land, you can use centerfire rifle up to I think as low as 6 mil or something like that. And then on public land, you still have to maintain that straight wall thing, But if you've ever been to a public land on Indiana, it's like the Orange Army. It's like everywhere you look, there's a man in the tree.
Poor deer steps out. It's like 15. Sounds like Fallujah. And then you got people in fist fights like who shot the deer.
Yep. Right.
So Dave, next, you favorite and least favorite?
You guys know mine. It doesn't necessarily qualify in the last 10 years because it was released before, but I'm going to consider it because Alexander Arms didn't release all the specs on it until after that. But 6.5 Grendel is, my opinion, available, reliable, performs, pretty much does anything that you want it to do, especially in this state or in the Midwest. But small varmint up to decently large game. All the kinks have kind of been worked out of the cartridge.
Magazines.
But we're poop on his gear. We don't want to poop on his gunner.
Hey.
I agree. He's got 6.5 Grendels are fantastic cartridge.
Elander mags have worked in all of my rifles very reliably.
I've just found that you have to keep the guns like regularly clean. If they do get somewhat dirty, that's when you might run into that occasional malfunction. But I found that if you shoot them, take them out for the day, and clean them, it does pretty good. But
because I love the ballistics of 6.5 Grendel. I absolutely love ballistics of the 6.5 Grendel. It's just I ran into problems in trying to get 30-round magazines to reliably feed. I never got it to do it 100%. But, and for me, that's...
my rifles run the Elanders. And in defense of you guys, it's usually the employees that are running my rifles, not myself.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, they run. I mean, we've run demo shoots and stuff with them, and they go.
For a while there, you had affordable steel-cased ammo before Russia had to go in.
It's still around. For how long, right? So what I was going to say is I'm easily swayed to push into ARC if that happens.
Mm-hmm. I love ARC. I do.
But right now, Grendel is made by pretty much every major U.S. manufacturer, ammo manufacturer, where ARC is still pretty Hornady specific, but I'm sure that'll catch up. So Grendel, with availability, you've got, all the majors making it. So it makes it a little bit, still edges it out, in my opinion. Now, to me, the worst was just simply because it caused me so many headaches on the retail side was Valkyrie. 224, the rollout, the expectations, the performance at the beginning, the confusion with barrel specs and ammo specs was a nightmare because everybody wanted it, but it was not ready for prime time. And by the time it, even if you call it now ready for prime time, the hype is over, and I think it lost its chance.
It's got its cult following now. I use it because it's still affordable. Remember, they had American Eagle that was about the same price as 223, and that was the big hope. Like I could run it in a standard AR, have more power than 5.56, but not so much recoil.
Everybody's hope was the high BC stuff at range,
the 90 grain bullets at range,
and that ammo was not compatible with the initial barrel spec releases, and it was only running the light varmint stuff. And then guys started trying to load their own, which reloaders are going to perfect what they can. But then guys wanted performance at range, and it just wasn't there.
It's not there.
And I'd be lying if I said in the last 2 years that I've looked back on it and tried to figure it out because nobody asked for it. The demand isn't there.
It's gone, yeah.
So I think that's the biggest missed opportunity because there was so much interest.
Do you think it was the rollout that was botched? Do you think the cartridge just was a lot of hype and it just really didn't deliver? Now, I agree with the 90 grain stuff. So the 90 grain stuff, the accuracy just wasn't there. So I was looking at it like, cool, man, a light recoiling 5.56 size weight rifle, true 1,000-yard performance and hits, great BC. I mean, God, it had a really, really high BC on it. And what do I run now? A thermal on an F4 rifle, and it only shoots the 60 grain varminting bullets.
Right.
Well, and it shoots really tight groups. It's really accurate, but it's only those varminting bullets, and it's not a 1,000-yard cartridge.
I think what their problem was is they ran into... They wanted that thing to have a bullet spec from like 50 to 90 grain. They wanted to cover that spectrum with one twist rate, and it's like...
I think there were some issues originally with the SAMI spec that was wrong. I think there was chamber specs that were confusing manufacturers. I remember talking to Criterion back in the day, and then there was a rifling twist issue. Gosh, do you remember they were trying to fix the accuracy problems? Do you remember there's actually like an 88.1 grain match load Hornet he made? The 88 grain. Remember that?
I want to say we might have some somewhere.
I know I have some. I just recently saw it when I had the 224 out shooting it. We're talking about coyote hunting, and I was playing with the F4. And I found some of them, like, oh my gosh, I remember this stuff, because that was when they were trying to solve the problem of the inaccuracy with the heavy bullets. And they went to 88.1 grains or something, at least 88 grains.
Well, if I remember correctly, my conversation with the engineers at some of the barrel manufacturers were that basically at 90 grains, if you change the barrel spec to optimize performance with the 90 grains, the lighter weight ones could possibly become unsafe to shoot.
Yeah,
and so
that's just kind of standard. That's
right.
That was their problem, I think, because they had.
And
that
I think
grain weight.
That's
range.
why I think you don't. And like I said, I haven't looked at it in recently. But are you even seeing the 90 grain stuff on the market anymore?
It's out there, yeah.
Can you get it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's relatively available because nobody's buying it.
But for how long?
I use the varminting stuff. It shoots great.
Right.
I love the cartridge for what it is. That's my varminting cartridge. But
at the same time, when you compare it to a lot of, it has a lot of competition.
Oh, absolutely. You got
one-dimensional
204
like
Ruger. You got the stuff that he's talking about, which is Wildcat stuff. I'll never get into, but just for something I could go pick up a box of ammunition at most any gun store and throw it in a 6.8 SPC magazine, which I have ample because 6.8 is one of my favorite cartridges, and I can run 30 rounds of it and go out and shoot prairie dogs all day long with it.
And me being Grendel adopter, that was probably the biggest comparison at the time when it was released, and that was already kind of nailed down as far
Grendel
as performance. Yeah, and so it's like all the uncertainty around the cartridge. Like, well, I'm just going to stick with Grendel, and most everybody did. Ammo was available, inexpensive if you shot steel case. Which another note is the Alexander Arms barrels. Probably developed them specifically for the steel case. It shot the steel case fantastic, but you get into the Hornady match and all that, wasn't great.
Yeah.
2-3 inch groups. But all the other manufacturers were making it for the match stuff, but they wouldn't shoot the cheaper steel case very well. So it's like you pick one or the other. So, there's a little bit of issues with that.
But you found that out by essentially not poo-pooing on the gear. You went out and tried it out, found your own, okay, this is working, this isn't working, or whatever it is. I don't necessarily like this. Let's move on.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but you didn't sit there, if somebody wanted to try, man, I really like 224 Valkyrie for this reason, like, hey, man, this is my experience or whatever. Good luck with it,
Right.
I hope you enjoy it.
Give it a shot.
Exactly. So, I would say what? Optics. Optics is probably the next one where...
So, I've been a proponent of red dot sights on handguns for a long time, right? Especially when companies started just beginning to mill their machines from the miller slides from the factory for red dot sights. I immediately started using them, but I was using adapter plates. I got some really funny ones, like adapter plates that you drift out the rear sight on the Glock and you slide this thing. It was made by Suarez International, and you put an RMR on top of it. And I've been running red dots on handguns for a long time.
And those existed for, you look at CZs and Berettas, that, those old kind of optic rear dovetail optic mounts, those have been around for a long time.
Yep.
And
and I was rocking them back then, right? I was constantly trying to find a way to put them on my carry gun.
Did you ever have one that held zero for any
for handgun distances? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Suarez one worked pretty good because you could slide it into the dovetail, then it had a screw you could tighten that would lock it really, really tightly.
Yeah.
So I was an early adopter. I was telling people red dot sights on handguns are the future. And you wouldn't believe the backlash I got. You're an idiot. It'll never happen. It's stupid. Iron sights are just too easy for... And I'm like, guys, were red dot sights a fad on rifles?
Well, I remember you making that argument at the time when it was just becoming popular. Like, why is this different than what's happened with ARs?
Right.
Red
it's
dots
faster, more accurate, more repeatable.
They have become the standard. Why are handguns any different? And I mean,
and it took me forever and lots of flack. And now every single major manufacturer is putting slide cuts on their guns
from the factory.
But then I've also complained about the reflex sight, which I'm holding here, because the emitter is open to the elements. If I drag this thing through the dirt, my red dot sight's gone, and now I can't even see through it unless I dunk it in water or, hopefully be able to wipe it out with my finger. Meanwhile, hopefully the person's, not more than 15 yards away from me, because I'm never going to hit them with it.
Right.
This was a great first step. But I've been an advocate for the sealed sights, and I've been saying for years they need to seal the device up. And we've even done videos on this on the occluded eye gun sight, which was and this is what gave me the idea, was the Armisen OEG from when I was a kid. You couldn't see through it; it was just a black space with a dot in the center, and you had to keep both eyes open. We've done a video on the site, and the same is true with this.
The early aim points were similar.
True Dots and Armsens were aim points. I think were always electronic and always could see through. I think
no, they were fiber optic and occluded, so they didn't. You couldn't see through them. They were blacked out,
like on the Stormtrooper guns.
Yeah, really old aim points had the same.
Sante Raid, that was True Dot. That was very much like the. But maybe they did. I can't really recall. I always thought they were electronic and you could see through them. But regardless, my point being was, this one, so the front lens is recessed. Not really, it does have a lens over it, but some of the ones have kind of a slightly front recessed lens here and flush on the back. And the point being, if you get this thing, you dunk it in mud, come out, all you gotta do is run your thumb across it, and now you can see the dot inside there. Even if you can't see through the sight, both eyes open, you can still hit the target. And this is the future. Now you have HoloSun, I think it's the 509T. SIG just released a Romeo now that you can bolt on a cover, then bolt a little plastic rear thing, which we're going to make a video on, see how that works in water. But everybody's moving in this direction. The P2 just came out. The P1 was a mess because of its short battery life. People called it the mailbox and called it stupid. I'm telling you now, sealed red dot sights on handguns are the future.
I want to say,
but people continue to poop on it.
Has a smaller one for, like, how they got the CC model of like RMRs and things for the micro ones. I think they
the
now
lens
have like
is so tiny. It's so hard to quickly pick up that dot. It's so hard for new users to see.
Well, they have like a sealed unit for those now too. Like,
do they?
It's it's not like the 509T, maybe it's 507T or something like that, but there's like a smaller little mailbox looking thing that's sealed for even those.
And that's the future. That is the future.
And the biggest thing on the retail floor that we see, guys looking to go to it on their carry guns that have never used it before, I always put out the warning, is that if you're buying it to make you faster, it will, but only after a long learning curve. So if you don't have the range time to put in immediately to be able to improve your draw times and how fast you pick up that dot, until you have that time, I wouldn't.
So here's a solution. Here's a physical solution to that problem. It's called the Vulcan. Have you seen it? It's a chevron and has an outer circle around it. So when you bring the weapon up, you'll see, if you can't see your chevron, the actual dot, you'll see a part of this bigger circle, and that circle will tell you, oh, I need to come up and left. And it's that fast. It's really intuitive.
No, I haven't seen that.
So Primary Arms came up with that. My friend Dimitri came up with it.
Dimitri.
And that solves a problem for new shooters because they can quickly go, and make that quick adjustment, because most people that aren't used to red dot sights will bring it up and they won't know where the dot is, right? Well, the Vulcan gives you that big outer ring that when you have a perfect sight picture, you don't see the ring. But if you make that dot go away, now you'll see that curvature of the ring, which intuitively your mind's going to go, oh, it's
so
right,
is that
left,
like a range-only add-on that you take on and off, or is it there?
No, it's just how the sight's made. It's just called the Vulcan. Yeah, I think HoloSun is making it and using the Primary Arms reticle from Dimitri. So that is an ideal red dot sight for a first-time red dot sight user because it teaches them how to present, because that's what you're trying to learn how to do.
Theoretically, it's so hard for people. Theoretically, if you keep the same muscle movement that you did with iron sights, the dot will be there. But it's so hard for people because they're sighting, when they're doing their draw, they're just trying to see through the window and find the dot as opposed to just relying on their muscle memory to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I really found frustrating about the poo-pooing of hardware.
Are there any major handgun brands that aren't doing a factory cut?
It's so funny. Did you see all
Steyr?
Did you? Yeah, maybe
they're
Steyr,
major, but they're little M9 L9s. They have yet to factory cut those things at all.
Did you see all the hype? It finally broke. FN got a new handgun. Had Tim Kennedy out there. Oh, this is going to be so amazing.
The 5.7?
Yeah, it's
the new
5.7, and it's slide cut for a nut sight.
Finally. Oh my god.
And all the hype, they had Conan Noir, they had all these, all these influencers like, oh, this is gonna be great. Oh my god, this is gonna be amazing, and it's a 5.7 with a slide cut.
Ruger finally.
Ruger just released theirs too, didn't they?
Ruger from day one.
Yeah, you could
had it.
You can mount it.
The Ruger 5.7's been optics
right out of day one. It had that
it's
capability.
Not like cut, but I think you can like
it's an adapter
bolt
plate that bolts onto it. Yeah.
But regardless, I've always said that too. It's like it has been this long. How come nobody's offered a 5.7 with optics cut and a threaded barrel from the factory? Why? Where's the threaded barrel? Like, why? They always want to suppress the thing, but nobody wants to give you a threaded barrel for it.
But then FN is also notorious for voiding warranties for the use of suppressors, even though their guns have suppressor settings, and in the owner's manual they tell you how to use the suppressor setting.
Yeah.
But then follow up with fine print. If you actually install the suppressor on this firearm, you will lose your warranty.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do find it funny. But again, that new 5.7 that's come out, if you want to get one, absolutely go crazy.
Yeah.
One. I want you to.
I think it's a good looking pistol. I think the cartridge is underpowered. I go back to the old post from Tim Kennedy. It's like, oh, this is my favorite cartridge because it's a rifle cartridge, because it's bottlenecked. It's like a little mini rifle cartridge. And if you're a bad guy at 100 yards, I'll get you at 100 yards through a car door. I'm like, oh man,
it's
legit. Such misinformation.
It's a legit cartridge, and it's in its original design and it's an original intent. The problem is they neutered it to the civilians and only distributed the ammo that it was developed for to law enforcement.
But even then, law enforcement's shedding those rounds. That cartridge is not popular anymore. The agencies that adopted it are dumping it now and going.
The only thing that I've seen that has, the handguns, I never saw adopted in any sort of mass. The P90s are very popular with canine officers. So even our local department has P90s because they can manipulate it with one hand while hold it up for long periods of time and manipulate it with a dog lead.
The whole reason we told them about the X95, but okay.
No, Porter County, so our local county runs X95s for that same reason.
You're poo-pooing on that gear, man.
But the
poo-pooing the cartridge.
Some of the cities run the P90 and they really like them. I still think the P90 from a gun design is
I love it.
Maybe the most advanced. Unique.
The most unique, just because of how it stacks the rounds and then rotates them into alignment and drops them down.
I really think
other than that, just a simple blowback.
It's reliable. The magazines, 50-round mags that are easy to load. The gun takes apart and puts together in seconds.
Yeah.
I think
lots of plastic.
My biggest beef with the X95 is even in 223, 556, it's like you're shooting a 308. Like everything IWI puts out, they take, how big is that gas port? Quadruple it.
Yeah, make it bigger.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
it's a reliability
here's you got the 300 blackout, you have an adjustable gas system on it. Why don't you put that same adjustable gas system or the block, if you will, on the 556 and just create a different gas regulator on there so you have a suppressed, unsuppressed setting or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Jesus. It's like everything they do is just, like I said, quadruple that gas port. You know what I mean? Because everything, it was just like initially with the Tavor 7. I remember when we first got the Tavor 7, I was like, I'm not shooting this.
No, that gun had...
After 4 rounds, it felt like you got in a car crash every time you fired the gun.
But to IWI's credit, they sent us that gun as a prototype. Mm-hmm. And we gave them honest feedback like, this thing will knock fillings out of your face. This will give you a migraine within 20 rounds. And that was because the recoil impulse was so violent. And they redesigned the spring, the gas system. They redesigned everything. And the gun as it stands today
I love that
is
gun.
the most amazing 308 rifle out there.
Yep. I love that gun.
T7 is freaking amazing.
That's one of my
they listened and they fixed
favorite.
it. They changed a lot to get it to where it is.
What I'm saying
because of the feedback that was offered.
What I'm saying though is IWI products like the X95. With the P90 though, you do have a lighter recoiling round, and for the dog teams and things like that. That's fantastic.
Have we had anybody call and ask for a recoil pad for a P90 yet? We did with the AK. I was just wondering.
They should. It's very violent, horrible.
Oh, I think it's a cool cartridge. The problem with self-defense,
saying that, 2 things about IWI is, one, looking at who's designing and who they were designing it for. It was not being designed to be suppressed. It's designing for their own military use.
No, not in the case of T7. It's an
No. I'm saying early on.
Tavor
and X95.
SAR and X95.
To play devil's advocate, if it would have come over with an adjustable gas block and not had one going to the IDF, everyone would have complained that it's not the military gun.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. I mean, maybe an aftermarket option that you can add, but for the Tavor and the X95, I think they brought it in the right.
How are the Gen 2 Galil selling compared to the Gen 1s? Or do they?
To me,
They're okay.
To me, it seems like there's a definite difference.
I thought the Gen 1s were more popular because they're true military rifles versus the Americanized version.
I mean, you can't quite compare them apples to oranges because the Gen 1 already filled a large demand in the market for that gun. So a lot of the people who would have rather bought the Gen 2s already have a Gen 1. But they're selling. They sell quite a bit.
That's good that they continue selling.
I mean, the majority of guns...
Best the AKs on the market, in my opinion.
The majority of the Galils that we've sold in the last couple of years have been the special edition ones. So 545s and the 556s.
Those are so cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they did that to Rock and Lock.
I know. That was one thing that I applaud them for sure. Those are really awesome.
The weird thing about that is that we had all those special edition 545 guns come in, and they's just gone, right? Yeah. Hours just flew.
Yeah.
Right? We get in, and they made 545 each of 3 different barrel lengths.
Right.
Then we got the 500 limited edition of the 556 one, Rock and Locks, with the 8.3s. They only made 500 of one type, and they're just slow selling.
And that's the coolest one of them all. Now, granted, I wish it would have had a 13-inch barrel or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been more desirable, but also what's going on with ammo and 545 availability, you would think...
That gun makes a lot of sense. I really like
it uses it uses original Galil ARM mags.
Yep.
They're new production. They fit in my classic guns and work fine, and vice versa. And they're brand new production. I mean, and the fact that people are overlooking that, everybody wanted a Rock and Lock Galil forever, and there it is.
Yep.
But
like I said, they only imported 500. I shouldn't say made. They only imported 500, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's all there is. And they're not even making Gen 1s anymore, to my knowledge.
No, they stopped them for the U.S. market.
I do find it interesting though that the 545s were gone, but those, it's like, to me, that's a more logical choice to choose. But you got the folks that really love 545. They love that caliber.
You guys know it's hard for me to get excited. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, 4th generation in the retail industry. It's hard for me to get really excited about just about anything that came in. But I picked one of those up.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to.
And you tricked it out. Yeah.
It wasn't because it was special edition. I thought it was neat.
Yeah.
So I picked it up and tricked it out.
We do a pretty good job of making fun of him because he is,
it sits down there with his can on
gun shop owner.
It's hard.
Whenever he buys a gun, it's like, oh my
Ring
God.
bells. Ding, 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 ding.
You guys,
Day off. But all right, well, that was a fun discussion. I mean, I think the whole point of this was to kind of drive home the concept of explore new things. When a new cartridge comes out, like the 22 Creedmoor, I'm interested in it. When it stops being a wildcat,
it's not out.
What I'm getting ready to say is, when it stops being a wildcat and Hornady actually turns it into a commercial product, I'll be the first one in line with my money in hand to play with it, because based upon what you've told me from our customers at Copper that are using it, that you've witnessed some of, really good accuracy, and it's just literally blowing coyotes up, and coyotes are really tough critters to put down.
Sometimes.
I mean, it depends on where you hit them, but I mean, I've seen other people's recordings from Pulsar thermals that we use, and we've been on our own hunts, and more often than not, you'll knock them down, but they'll get right back up and run.
Yeah.
And, so you really, at shot placement, we also wind up shooting really long distances just because of where we're at.
Because my favorite thing right now, my kick right now, is 20 practical. And that was because a buddy, brought his over, shot it, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
All it is a 5.56 neck down to 20 cal, and that's it. And we're punching almost holes in steel plates. Like, it's just...
We got to play with that.
It's
I want to see that thing. I mean, and you're into 204 Ruger. You're like the king of different stuff, and that's what's so fun, because there's been times that you've shown me something. Even the guys at the shop are like this, like, oh, that's silly, man, whatever. And then you'll come back and start talking about your experiences, and everybody's like, can you build me one of those? Can I get one of those? And next thing you know, we're out looking to get the same thing. So, like in the AR world, you're the king around in our little circle here that always finds the cool stuff. And
always building weird
either
stuff.
figuring out how to suppress something and make it like with almost zero recoil, and super accurate. It's pretty funny.
Tinkerer.
Yes,
I know, man.
I like to, but that's me. Like,
The yin and
somebody
yang
will
of
tell
the
me,
AR.
don't do that. It's just dumb, and I'm like, okay. And I'm just going to go do it anyway because I'm not going to take anybody's word for it. Like until I
That little
experience it
stumpy
myself.
6.8 SPC you built, just, I love that thing. It's so cool. 'Cause
10.5,
I'm a 6.8.
6.8.
I'm a 6.8 nut. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. And again, the whole gist of this video is don't be so quick to poo-poo things. Don't get your mind poisoned by the forums where the brain trust says this is stupid and don't buy it, or that this suppressor is too loud, or that this is, inaccurate, or this is garbage. If you have the resources and something piques your interest, go out and try it and talk to other people that you may know that actually have experience with it, and don't let the brain trust of the internet get to you too much. Now, there's a lot of good information out there, obviously, but there's just as much misinformation out there, and people have very, very strong biases. People are brand loyal, people are cartridge loyal, people are just loyal in general to whatever, and they're just going to poo-poo whatever challenges whatever their interest is.
Yep.
And so that's the point of this video. Try new things. I think you're going to find that the shooting sports have a lot more to offer than 5.56 and 9mm. Guys, if you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best possible way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button and support us here in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for 14 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.